An emotion is a motivational state, and it can be plotted on a three-dimensional axis. There is level of arousal. There is approach withdrawal, and there is reward punishment, which is the motivational aspect of emotion. And on that three-dimensional grid, all human emotion can be plotted. But the most important one I want to focus on right now is the motivational dimension. Because if emotions are motivations, and you can self-regulate your emotions using your frontal lobe, you can self-regulate your motivation. So that the frontolimbic circuit is the source of self-motivation. This is where you are able to motivate yourself in the absence of consequences. This is where you think about those goals, and in thinking about them, it actually motivates you. It actually creates a positive, motivational mood state. You want that goal, you want to attain it, and you will use that motivation to sustain action over time in the absence of consequences. Humans are the only species that can sustain behavior for more than seconds to a minute in the absence of a consequence. All other species are Skinnerian, stimulus-response organisms, but not humans. Humans can build in a pause, and in that pause they can aim their behavior further ahead in time, and they can reach into the limbic system and motivate that behavior. This is the source of drive, persistence, willpower, stick-to-itiveness, the ability to chart a course and to dog it to death. As Walt Disney said, the secret of all success is this ability to take an idea and to sustain action toward it in spite of all irrelevant activity going on around you. You know it as persistence and determination. Most adults would refer to this as willpower, and it is what many adults with ADHD who we have interviewed have said that they lack: the ability to engage in a self-disciplined, persistent course toward their goals. They have goals, they have ideas, they have wishes, they have dreams. There are things they hope to accomplish in life, and most of them will never be attained. Not because the ideas were not good ones, not because the what and the when were impaired, but because they can't fuel the fuel tank. This is like a great cruise missile with a brilliant computer system and a map of the enemy's terrain, and the fuel tank is empty. The missile sits on the launching pad. Brilliant as its plans may be, it cannot get off the pad. You need self-motivation for all future-directed behavior. And so now we know where the self-motivation deficits are coming from. The corollary of this deficit is that people with ADHD will always be dependent on the immediate consequences that surround them for how long they can sustain an action, for how long they can persist. They will be externally dependent on the fuel for their behavior. Others are internally dependent. They generate their own motivational states. So now you know why it is so hard to sustain action toward a goal, because part of the deficit is motivational. ADHD is MDD, motivation deficit disorder. You are going to be very emotionally impulsive. You will be characterized as having low frustration tolerance, impatience, quickness to anger, unable to tolerate waiting, showing your emotions more easily than others, and more raw, unmoderated emotion, hence the term impulsive emotion, and more generally, more easily excitable. Now, if all of that sounds like a mood disorder, it isn't. Mood disorders are where the limbic system is overexpressing abnormal levels of emotion, and individuals have trouble regulating it. That would be bipolar disorder, for instance, which is largely a limbic system disorder. In contrast, ADHD is not a mood disorder. It's a failure to regulate mood disorder. It's a self-regulation of emotion disorder. The emotions the individual is having are quite normal, but most people would have suppressed them, would have inhibited, moderated, self-calmed, self-soothed, and then brought those emotions in line with their longer-term welfare in that situation. That is what the person with ADHD cannot do as well. Inhibit, self-calm, self-soothe, contemplate, and moderate that emotion. So if you're an adult with ADHD, you may find yourself sitting in a business meeting where you have just been insulted. You are much more likely to leap across the table and throttle your supervisor. And you will be fired. Everybody else felt as you felt, thought what you thought, and summarily suppressed it. In their mind, they throttle the supervisor. But it is not released to be expressed through the spinal cord into real behavior and action. And now you understand the difference. The mood is the same. The expression of the mood is not. There is no stopping to self-regulate the emotional state. So we now know that emotional impulsiveness and dysregulation are just as much a part of adult ADHD as are inattention, poor working memory, poor time management, and impulsive decision-making. And now you know why. It is the inability of this anterior cingulate to govern that limbic system, so that emotions, once provoked, get expressed without the top-down management that other people would be doing, using the frontal lobe to reach in, take hold, and fine-tune the limbic system so that it is more appropriate for social goals. ADHD is not an attention disorder, it's a blindness to the future. It is a myopia to the impending future events. You are nearsighted in time, which means that the child and adult with ADHD are going to wait until the future is imminent. And then they will try to deal with it. But as long as the future stays out there, I don't have to deal with that. The closer it gets, the more I'm going to organize toward it. But I can't really do much about it until it's the 11th hour. And then I will race around, try to slap things together in a hapdash manner to get it done. ADHD creates a nearsightedness to time so that the person with the disorder cannot organize to the delayed future, but only to the imminent future. And so everything in life becomes a crisis. But the crisis was avoidable, and no one has any patience with this because they see this as a moral failing. You could have chosen to get ready, but you didn't. It is phrased as a form of laziness. This layabout, ne'er-do-well, carefree, careless attitude that you could change if you wanted to, right? But we know it as the executive failure it really is. This disorder precludes you from organizing across time. So you live in the moment, and you cannot organize very large, hierarchically sequenced behavior across time. It means that future-directed behavior is intentional behavior, which means ADD is actually IDD, intention deficit disorder. I don't seem to be able to accomplish most of the things I intended to do. You can call that a short attention span, but I think intention deficit disorder captures it much better. Now, the frontal lobes, the executive system, is where you take what you know and you apply it in your daily life. It is not where you know something, it is where you use what you know. The back part of the brain acquires knowledge. The front part of the brain puts it in play. ADHD has separated these two like a meat cleaver. So it really doesn't matter what you know. You can't use it as effectively as other people can. ADHD is a performance disorder. You can't perform the things you know how to do. It is not a knowledge disorder. Most people with ADHD know about as much as anybody else from their neighborhood with their education in that school at that age. But they can't use it, not to anywhere near the degree of effectiveness of others. So people with ADHD know what to do, but they can't do what they know. So what does this mean? It means that teaching skills is a waste of time because they won't be used. Skills are knowledge, and these people already have most of the skills anyway. But even if you teach them new ones, the likelihood that they will get implemented is pretty slim. I can hand any adult a list of time management recommendations, and I can guarantee you that most of them will never get used. In fact, the paper will be lost on the way home because it will blow up under the front seat of the car, and then you'll forget that it's there. Or if you do remember that it's there, you'll tape it to the refrigerator, but you won't look at it. And if you do, you'll say, you know, I really should be doing those things. These are really cool things. This is what I really need help with. And then you'll just go about behaving impulsively anyway. And you'll come back in and say, you know, Dr. Barkley, those were great ideas. Did you do them? Well, I'm working on it. Boy, I find that hard to... You see what I'm talking about? This is not a knowledge disorder. It never was. It's a problem with using what you know. And no sheet of paper corrects your performance disorder. But the hyperactivity will decline markedly with age, becoming internal in form, a subjective sense of restlessness, but not an outward hyperactivity. The adults that we have seen in our clinics and in our research projects do not climb on furniture. Spouses do not bring them in because they're sliding downstairs in suitcases. But the adult with ADHD commonly reports an inner restlessness, both of thought and activity, where they describe themselves as needing to be busy, to be engaged in multiple activities. The term multitasking has been used for this inappropriately. Multitasking refers to people who can successfully do multiple things at a time. You may have multiple things going on, but they're not getting done. Part of the reason that our disorder, that the name of this disorder, is so often pilloried in the media is because I think we misnamed it. This is a developmental disorder of self-regulation, not of attention. But the second purpose you would do BMOD for has nothing to do with instruction. It's motivational, to make up for the motivation deficit disorder that this disorder produces. And so if you do BMOD for its motivational value, you can't stop it. Because if you pull it, you've pulled the motivation. If you do BMOD for its instructional purpose, you can pull it. Because once they've acquired the skill, they'll use the skill and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Now, do you see a contrast here? Most parents and nearly all teachers I deal with believe that BMOD is for instructional value. That's why we do it for ADHD, which is why whenever you go into a school and you try to teach a teacher to set up a token system, the first question out of his mouth is, how long do I have to do this? When will he internalize the program? And my answer is, never. As long as he's in your class, you will have to arrange artificial consequences to replace the delayed ones. And if you don't do that, he will not work for you. So, I want you to think about token systems and star charts and all behavior modification as being equivalent to a ramp that comes into this building. That ramp is there to make people who are physically disabled less motorically impaired. They can get into the building in their wheelchairs or whatever other devices they're using. But would you ever say to such a person, after 30 days of entering this building successfully using the ramp, you know the punchline, right? Can I take the ramp away? Have they internalized the ramp? Well, of course not. The ramp was never for teaching, right? The ramp is a prosthesis. A prosthesis is an artificial means of reducing the disabling consequences of your disorder. It is not to train you up into anything. No amount of using a ramp is going to take the ramp away. And no amount of BMOD is going to take the BMOD away. Now, we also find when we meet with our adults with ADHD that this diagnosis and this history of impairments usually brings with it a mild grief response. Sometimes it's not so mild, by the way. Sometimes the anger and the grieving and the depression are quite extreme and require separate counseling sessions in their own right. We have had adults with ADHD become extraordinarily angry about how could earlier professionals have missed this diagnosis, and the regrets they have about the failures that are now irreparable. The marriage is lost, the college degree never attained, the friendships that were lost, the accidents that they had, maybe the injuries. You can't make up for that. Even though you may get diagnosed at 35 or 40 years of age, there's 40 years there of irreparable harms that have mounted up. So it's no surprise that some of our adults are angry or depressed about not having been treated earlier when it might have made a difference in changing their life course.